Hello there. This is Rom Wills coming back at you with yet another podcast. Do black men read? The answer to that is yes, but there's an asterisk because you got to take it in context. But before I go any further, two things. One, let me shout out Joe from DC who requested this topic about black men reading. Now, like I said, it's yes, but with an asterisk. Before I go any further, let me tell you what I'm basing my the following thoughts on, because it's one of those issues that people have different opinions on. But see, mine is coming from a professional place. Understand something. I've been publishing since 1995. I've been in the book industry since 1995. And even before that, just, talking with bookstore owners and stuff like that. Now, even in the publishing industry, understand, I've dealt with several bookstore owners, distributors, been vended books selling, not just my books, but other people's books for like over 100 or something vending shows over the years, maybe even more than that. And then I had a book stand at one time when I was a bookseller. So definitely, I would say yes, black men read. Now, the idea that black men don't read, it probably goes back longer, but when I was conscious of it, or conscious of the statement, started back in the 90s. So this issue's been around a long time. And usually people have different thoughts on it. Like, I've met black male writers who've complained that black men weren't buying their books. And there's a reason for that. Right? So it's like, oh no, these brothers just don't read. But I'm going to give y'all some context with that. And just to be clear, of course there are the statistics about black male reading scores and all of that. As I'm going to point out later, you got to take those with a grain of salt as to whether black men would read a book if presented with a book. And this is an aggregate. Of course, there's going to be some brothers who don't read, but I would put the thought that black men don't read up there with that black men aren't good fathers. Even though the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, published a study saying that in America, black men are the most involved fathers. So, I will put it up there with that. Now, of course, I still put an asterisk beside it, and we'll get to it, right? Now, understand something. As I said, I've been conscious of the issue since the 90s. Now, understand something with the publishing industry and the black community in general. Most books are geared towards black women and not black men. Keep that in mind. Most books. I mean, in the early 90s, we had Sherazade Ali's, The Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman. And plenty of black men bought that. But that was one book. That was one book. I wouldn't use that I wouldn't use that as an example of the whole, industry. That was one book, and that was popular, and plus women were buying that book as well. But one thing, getting back to the early 90s, the big thing was all these books for women. And then in 92, there was that book which was a historic phenomenon, which really opened up the publishing industry for a lot of black writers, and that was Waiting to Excel by Terry McMillan. And that book sold like crazy, spawned really 2 movies. It spawned the Waiting to Excel movie, and then when she did another book, How Stella Got Her Groove Back, that spawned yet another movie, probably put Taye Diggs really on the map. And Angela Bassett with her fine self. Now, just as an aside, Angela Bassett's fine. Shoot, Angela Bassett, please. All she had to do was say hi to Rom, and that's it. He'd be like, shit. She'd be like, Rom, bring me a burger. Shoot, I buy a burger franchise or something. Damn, she fine. Good Lord. Anyway, right? Back then, once Terry McMillan opened up that market, and people saw how much black women were buying stuff, shoot, everybody was coming out with similar stories. There were quite a few people came out with that same formula. 4 women looking for Mr. Right. But there were very few men putting out stuff. And even the men putting out stuff, a lot of it was geared towards women. Because that was also Elin Harris back then, and he had that down low bullshit. So it was like, that was mostly women buying it. And, you had a few men. You had, Michael Baisden, he got put on when he wrote this book, Never Satisfied, How and Why Men Cheat, which bought mostly by women. Now, he tried to clean it up because he wrote a book, Why Men Cry in the Dark, but it wasn't that big, and still, it was still mostly women buying. Have y'all seen a theme now? I'm going to tell you what. The issue is not that black men don't read. Here's the asterisk. But there's not a lot of stuff out there that appeals to black men. But they will read if the book applies to them. This is not just Rom talking. This is a professional opinion. This is Rom when... I'm going to tell you what. I remember I was in a bookstore. For people in the D.C. area who might remember the Caribou bookstore chain when it was still in business. I used to go in the one that was in PG Plaza like all the time and hang out because it was this fine sister that worked in there. So, man, I need to give her a holler. We Facebook friends. I need to give her a holler, man. She was the sweetest people you ever want to meet, man. But I remember we just be talking and stuff, and she pointed out something interesting, which I kept up with over the years. I actually talked with other bookstore owners about this phenomena. And she was like, she said, you see all these content, because Caribou in most bookstores, they usually had the fiction that appealed to women. But then they also had nonfiction books that appealed mainly to men, but those sections were considerably smaller. These were the conscious raising type of books. These were the books on maybe religion, history, stuff like that. The quote unquote hoteps, the type they would buy, but then some other brothers would too, which would surprise a lot of people. I'm gonna get into that in a second, right? Well, I get into it now. She pointed out the books in the conscious raising section, and he said, Ron, see all those books over there? Dudes, straight up street dudes, thugs will come in and buy out that whole section. And I was sitting back and I was like, at first I was like, well, yeah, really? But then I'd be in there a few times and that's what they would do. They were picking up the books. And in general, not even thugs, but black men in general, their book buying habits were very simple. If you, like when I was selling books myself, I had a little table. I would split my books in half. I had a fiction on one side, the nonfiction, deeper stuff on another side. And sure enough, it would be dudes who you would consider thugs and stuff like that who would come by. Some other brothers, intellectual types, but all the brothers would gravitate to the nonfiction side. While the women and maybe a few men would gravitate towards the fiction side. In fact, one Muslim bookstore owner that I was real cool with, he called it bubblegum fiction. He called it the bubblegum stuff. He didn't like selling it. Consequently, he didn't get a lot of people in his store. But the people he got, mostly men. So they were buying it and they were supporting him for a long time. In fact, the only thing that really knocked out like these black bookstores that was selling stuff like that and had their little sections for men was really the online stuff. That's what's really killed it more than anything else. And that was industry wide. That's why right now, if you go into any Barnes and Noble, half the stores or at least a third of the store might be covered with toys. So you go in any Barnes and Noble now, it's kept in business by usually a Starbucks and a bunch of toys. And old stores like Walden's and Borders went out of business. So the black bookstores got caught up into it, but it wasn't for lack of support from black men reading. Even though, now this is another part of that asterisk. A lot of the books out there, like I said, you only got a small portion of books that really appeal to black men. Because if you look at the publishing, the publishing industry of books that appeal to the black community, what they're buying, you started with that waiting to excel thing, all relationships. And then, you got into, I say around 2000, you had Sister Soldiers, The Coldest Winter Ever. And that kind of started the street lit industry, the urban fiction and all of that. That's still mostly bought by women. And then you had Zane stuff and mostly women. There's not a lot out there for dudes. So it's not like the dudes won't read the books. Like I said, I used to have straight thugs buying my stuff. And, one time I talked about a seminar I did where thugs were dropping some information on me. They were giving me a book list. In fact, when I was selling books, one of my favorite instances was when there was this stick-up kid. Like, everybody knew him. That dude was like Omar. Like, everybody knew Omar. Everybody knew this kid in the neighborhood. They knew he was a stick-up kid. Sometimes he'd rob somebody and then pass them in the street or something. It was like one of those things. That dude came up to me one time, gave me a reading list and some cash. He said, "Hey, Rom, can you get this books for me?" I'm like, damn, this dude has 6-7 books. He was like, "Yeah, man, just get these books for me, man. You can keep the change, bro. I'm good for the money, man. I can get some more." Yeah, I'm sure you can, motherfucker. Shit. But seriously, they would come up and buy the stuff. They will buy it. Black men will buy the shit if it's relevant. Like I said, you had a lot of street dudes, you had some intellectual dudes. A lot of brothers, it's been my observation, a lot of brothers don't get into, like, fiction, the bubblegum, the shit that's out there anyway. But they will. Even in some of the street stuff, a lot of brothers don't get into it. But if you got some stuff, some intellectual type of stuff, some conscious raising stuff, some stuff to make you think, boom. In fact, when I was talking about the thug part, there's a distributor in the Baltimore area. Some of my Baltimore heads might know it because this brother in Baltimore, he owns this black book distribution company. He also owns African World Books. Right there on North Avenue. It was actually right there when that trouble broke out in Baltimore a few years ago. There was actually a picture circulating of some brothers standing guard in front of that store. As an aside, when that thing broke out, there was a lot of pictures that came out from that actually knew the people in them. Like, there was one picture of these gangs united and stuff, and I knew about 3 or 4 brothers in there who, were keeping the peace. And there was a lot of unsung heroes that kept shit from, like, getting worse than it could have been. But that's another podcast, right? But anyway, if you go to that distribution place, actually the bookstore is called Everyone's Place. The distribution part is called African World Books. You go in there, you can start a civilization. And, I was getting books from there, and I talked to the people there. They said, man, they were shipping out books to prisons. Brothers in prisons were getting books from them. I'm going to tell you what. Yes, black men read. Yes, they do. But the books have to be there for them. People have to actually write the books for them to read. And books have to be relevant. If one thing about black men, they ain't going to waste time on some bullshit. That's the one thing. And I'm saying this is a professional opinion. Over 20 years of doing this. Very few black, like, they might buy a fiction book here and there, but if they gonna spend money on something, it gotta be some life shit. In this society, black men don't really have a lot of luxury for entertainment. They really don't. Any black man worth his beans is going to read, if not the books, they're gonna read some online shit that's gonna be relevant. They're not any bullshit. Seriously. So they do read. Now, another issue, and I have to bring this up, is you have a lot of brothers who've written some, like, deep-ass books. Because, once again, not only am I, in the book industry, I'm meeting other vendors and stuff. And then, Just taking a day going through African World Books, there's a lot of gems. The biggest problem is marketing. Now, you look at somebody like Steve Harvey and how his book sold, right? He had major corporations backing it. The problem with a lot of writers who might bring out something is just marketing. A lot of people, when they think they publish a book or write a book, they think they think they're a book writer or just a publisher. Once it gets to a point they're trying to sell it, they are in the marketing business, whether they know it or not. So that's the biggest issue. And in fact, that was something I actually thought about in a while, just creating some type of company just to market books. And who knows, I might still do it. I actually need to do it. So you have a lot of writers who got, powerful stuff, even some fiction stuff. You got some brothers who've written some like killer fiction. I remember this one brother, he wrote this kind of street type of novel, but that thing was one of my favorite novels. Man, that thing, and it was short, but it was like poetic as hell. I was like, damn, dude just had a nice flow. But it's a marketing issue. That's the biggest issue. That's the biggest thing. A lot of brothers have stuff, but, selling out the back of your trunk can only get you so far. And it's hard right now with the bookstores. Not what they were, even though they're making a slight comeback, but not what they were. It's hard to get a lot of stuff out, and then it depends on the bookstore owner, who they want to deal with. It's a lot of stuff that could be out there that brothers could be reading, is just not getting to them. But I guarantee if they could get to them, they're always bought. So, yes, black men read, but the books have to be there for them to read. So if you're a writer, you got some nonfiction books out there, you're a black man, you got something for other black men, you're a nonfiction writer, put that book out. Put that book out. That's why I promote shit on this channel. If somebody give me a good book, I read it, I'll promote it. Seriously, I will promote it. I know I've done a few videos like that when people have gotten me the stuff. I will promote it. Because that's the biggest issue, and people will buy it. People have to know it's there. So yes, black men read, and we need to get off of that. That's some bull. Because anytime a stick-up kid will hand me some money to get him several books, you gonna tell me some educated, intelligent black men ain't gonna do the same and pick up the books? Think on that. So anyway, right? That's it for today. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace and blessings.